Round two of the Six Nations is done, and France have continued to set themselves as the lead protagonists. Ireland, well, they figured out that maybe that tragic fall against the French isn't permanent against the Italians, and the Scots were the heroes of the day at home at Murrayfield as they defeated the seemingly invincible English in the Calcutta Cup. My name is Joseph Terry, co-host of the Sin Bin 6 podcast. This is episode 3. My co-host, Mr. Billy North Lewis, well, he's on holiday right now, so I will be leading the ship for this episode. Make sure to give Sports News Blitz a follow on Instagram and on Spotify, as well as the YouTube channel, however you are listening or watching to this podcast. An eventful weekend then in arguably the greatest rugby tournament in the world. We're going to do this in chronological order, and we are going to start off in Dublin, where Ireland came out 20-13 victors against a fairly plucky Italian squad who managed to get a losing bonus point out of the tie and probably came out with as much as they were expecting to get out of a really strong performance for the visitors in a tie that was previously consigned to being judged or branded as the most boring match of any games in the Six Nations of the modern era. And an interesting game for the Irish. We saw that the Irish team faltered. They faltered on line-out. They faltered on scrum. They faltered on kicking, particularly the kicking strategy against the French when they were hammered at the Stade de France. And we saw improvements out of the Irish side. We saw improvements when it came to, namely, Sam Prendergast, who actually, I think, all in all, performed much better this time around. Again, picked once more over Jack Crowley and Harry Byrne. Jack Crowley, who was named on the subs bench. I think Sam Prendergast had a much better game. And yes, it was against probably much less fierce competition in the back line, even though that Italian back line can create some serious scares as it did over the fixture. I think Sam Prendergast had a much cleaner game and a much more confident, I think, game management. The game management was much more confident for the Leinster fly half, and I think that was a key part of how they were able to get over the line for this win. I think I'll get onto the winning margin a bit later on, because the winning margin was a lot shorter than I think we were expecting that to come out onto. One note as well before we start talking about the match action itself, and that's Holly Davidson, who refereed the match. She is the first woman to referee and officiate in the Six Nations, in the men's Six Nations, to be exact. A great achievement. Of course, Davidson already officiating a fixture at the 2023 Rugby World Cup previously, and now moving into Six Nations. A great moment there for women referees, and another good moment for this Six Nations tournament that's got a new face and a new kind of rugby viewer watching the games and hearing about the games, which I'm quite passionate about in terms of getting different people than your standard rugby fan, which looks and talks pretty similar to how I do. A great moment for Holly Davidson. Congratulations to her. And moving on to the match itself, Jamie Osborne broke early, making the line and offloading to Stuart McCloskey for the opening try. Conversion missed in the end for Prendergast, who did struggle from the tee, it must be said. However, I think his box kicking was better than it was against Ireland. Still major questions, though, to be asked in terms of that selection battle against Jack Crowley. We then moved into what was a period of growing dominance and also a period where Italy really applied the pressure onto the Irish. Simone Ferrari, the man of the match from the fixture against the Scottish, bulldozing his way through the front row of the Irish, and a superb try in the end to be scored by Nicotera as the Italians took the lead and added for a 5-point lead at the break with Garbezi's conversion clearing, a really strong start for the Italians. And we weren't expecting the Italians to be leading at the break. I think we expected the Italians to potentially get a point out the game, maybe even two. Nowhere near enough tries for either side to get a try bonus point in this fixture. But we were expecting Italians to come out stronger. They'd been talking in the press in the days before about wanting to upset the Irish at home. This is the same mentality that I spoke about in episode 1. Again, you can listen to that and watch it on YouTube and Spotify. I spoke about the idea that the Italians were coming to Cardiff every single year to prove that they deserved their place, to prove that all this time of Georgia this, Georgia that was rubbish, and that being in somebody's backyard was the momentum. That was what was driving them to perform better than anybody was expecting them to. And again, the Italians prove it once more, however, falling to defeat, but against an Irish side that were tipped to win the 2023 Rugby World Cup before another quarterfinal exit, the champions of 2024, and were part of the three-way battle for the title this time around. A superb performance by the Italians, even if the Irish were victors in the end. Jack Conan, he levelled the tie at 10-all, and then we came into this final act of the fixture with James Lowe intercepting a pass and then darting towards the posts to score the try that won the game in the end, as Italy was so close and pushed right towards the end as the clock dragged into the Reds. Ireland get their first victory of the tournament, whilst Italy pick up a try bonus point at 20-13 within 7 bonus points for those unaware of the bonus point rules. Again, bonus points have been actually a fairly new thing to Six Nations ever since 2017, I believe it was. So again, we're starting to see the bonus point system, I think, prove its worth, particularly for a side like Italy, who might not be expecting more than 1, maybe even 2 wins at a push. Italians moved to 4th on 1 point, picking up their first point of the season. Picking up their 5th point of the season after their first win last weekend, whilst the Irish move to 5th, having picked up their first points of the campaign. The Irish have a lot of work to do going into that game against England at Allianz Stadium in Twickenham, but it's much, much brighter if you're Andy Farrell to be talking about a team that have got a win. Still a must-win against England, and they would still have to perform much, much better to defeat the English, however poorly the English played against Scotland, which I'll come on to in a bit. But the Irish have a win, and I think confidence was key in terms of any Irish morale and or hopes of scalping England in Twickenham. We move to the second fixture on Saturday, the fixture that I cared the most about, as the Calcutta Cup delivers once more. Scotland reclaim the cup 31-20 in arguably England's worst performance for the last 2 years. Terrible shame that Mr. North Lewis is not here today, because I can just imagine the beaming smile on his face as he probably laughs at my expense. The Scots played flat out better. It was better discipline, better kicking strategy, and just were able to create the scoring chances from the 22. England had 2 tries converted from 11 visits into the Scottish red zone, while Scotland were ruthless when it came to driving forwards. Not helped, of course, by the fact that Henry Arundel got a 20-minute red card for an incredibly reckless challenge mid-air, and a deserved 20-minute red card as well, if you ask me. I think most English fans were in agreement that it was a pretty cut and dry red card, which it was. Again, Henry Arundel, a great player, great talent, great acceleration and zip. But it's the error of a young man. It's the error of a young rugby player. And I don't think that we can really argue against that. Scotland exercising the demons. This is a result which, for Gregor Townsend, might keep his job safe. And I did see some discourse online about Gregor Townsend's reign as head coach, saying, well, I'd like to beat teams that aren't England in Calcutta Cup. A totally fair point, because this is the game where we see Scotland picking up, and also Scotland really showing their might in terms of their squad. A squad that had plenty asterisks connected to it, as their biggest players were left out of the starting 15 for the second weekend in a row, particularly on the back three. And I think they would have wanted to see this kind of performance against an Italian side last weekend. Yes, I know it's poor conditions, but against an Italian side last weekend, or even against Wales, obviously, which is the big game now starting to come up for the Scots. But I'm not really going to talk about that, because I think this result is the platform for the Scots to push on against an English side that were found out. And it's the first time we've seen the English team properly found out for 80 minutes. I think we saw in the Argentina game that, yes, that second 40 minutes, that remontada second 40 minutes that we always see out of Los Pumas. We saw England get found out then, but that was a real jolt of adrenaline on the part of the Argentinians. This was understanding the game plan from minute one. This was a different loss, a different kind of collapse, let's say. Obviously, England didn't lose that tie against Argentina. They were victors by about 3 points in the end. However, this was the game plan found out immediately. And England didn't change the game plan. It was Borthwick ball, it was fairly slow ball, and we weren't really seeing that ingenuity. And bizarrely enough, when we did see that creativity, particularly from George Ford, we saw his drop goal get charged down, and it became the run-in try for Hugh Jones in the end. And that was the momentum shift. Hugh Jones runs in to score that try, and then after that point, England are constantly chasing the tail to close that gap from what was at that point 18, only able to get a try on the board at the 77th minute through Ben Earl, who was probably the best player, in fact, was the best player for England over the fixture, and a deserved try for his endeavours at number 8. Scotland deserved the victory. England deserved to lose. No bonus point at all from that fixture is a hammer blow to the hopes of any title as it stands. The situation is that France is now even more of a must-win, but we're also now relying on France to lose. And I can't see France losing. And this is the result which probably does condemn England to second place, probably ahead of Ireland. And when you look back at that fixture, you see knock-ons, you see spilled ball, you see forward passes, and you also see what was an incredibly scruffy scrum throughout the entire fixture on both sides, but I think primarily on the English side, just unable to play the game of get the referee on side that is to convince the referee that you are not at fault for the scrum collapsing. England deserved to lose that fixture. And where they go from here is an amazing, amazing call. Because they can either essentially hit out on the points difference just to give themselves any chance of defeating France. But again, this is all on that caveat. Can they defeat a team, and can France be defeated? Which I think on the balance of their first 2 matches probably isn't going to happen against both the bottom sides and the top sides in this 2026 Six Nations. George Ford, once again, I think put in a strong performance. It was definitely not his fault that drop goal attempt got charged down. I think it was the best option within the circumstance, just to really kick on and get some score pressure down onto the Scots. And Finn Russell, once again, proving that he is the best attacking player playing in the home nations right now. He knows he is the man, and he's not afraid to tell you. And I'm glad of that, because Finn Russell was the catalyst for this victory. And Bath are certainly better to have him in that squad. You compare Henry Arundel and Finn Russell, different positions. However, Arundel's early try, loses his head, gets sent off. Finn Russell is there leading the ship from the tee and kicking, which was a key area where Scotland found out the English advantage fairly early on. Similar meters gained, similar tackles made as well. The game was won in the breakdown, 10 turnovers for Scotland compared to 3 for England, and it was won with attacking kicks that put pressure on an English backline that were a player down for 20 minutes through most of the middle period of the tie. For England, a reality check, and the unbeaten streak ends at 12, 6 shy of the Eddie Jones historic run of 2018 to 19. This podcast is being recorded an hour after full time at Cardiff. And I still can't quite believe that I'm going to say that was a positive game for Wales. Final score: Wales 12, France 54, as France earn a bonus point outright in both halves. But Wales have got some serious positives to take from that game. I think, firstly, major errors and major flaws to pick out. Far too many knock-ons for the Welsh. Far too many one-along passes, which was a key issue of the Warren Gatland era this time last year. In fact, it's almost a year to the day where Warren Gatland resigned, where it's just next one, next one, next one, next one. The French were able to just borrow over ball during the breakdown and really enforce that pressure when it came to any Welsh attack. And the third area was some really severe mismanagement of the game, particularly with the unfortunate Adam Beard attempted grubber kick, which gets immediately blocked by Jalibert to score the try to take it to 26-7 into the break. An unfortunate score, but a score that could be certainly have avoided if you just have a bit of game management going into the game and going into the end of that half, which, in fairness, was not quite pulling away as much as it probably could have. I think I was there at 19-7 at 36 minutes gone, thinking, well, there is a chance here of at least getting a few tries on board. I wasn't even expecting a bonus point, but at least a few tries just to kick on a bit and to prove that there is some improvement actually being implemented by Steve Tandy and Matt Sherratt, particularly on the attacking side, which was the poorest probably from the last Six Nations, despite the fact the defence was woefully frail at points. But there are some serious, I think, bright sparks here. Lewis Rees-Zammit looked a lot more confident, I think, in the back. I know that, generally speaking, the reception to Rees-Zammit was stronger than expected, but still requiring improvement. I thought that he had a fairly strong game at fullback at 15. I think we're seeing Dan Edwards continuing to make the case why he should be the long-term 10 starter. And we also saw some fairly strong carrying from Rhys Carre in the front row as well, who I think is starting to prove his worth and prove his might, particularly in a pack which was about 80 kilograms heavier than the French was this afternoon. But the story is the French. The story is Teo Atisobe and Louis Biarré and the debutant for Les Bleus coming into a side that is already stacked with threats on the wings and in the centres with Fabien Barry, the debutant, into the side, and once again proving that he is deserving of that place. And we were talking in the first few episodes about changing your squad. We see the lack of players, the lack of experience sometimes within that team, with particularly Gaël Ficou in this case. But then Bro Boiry comes in and stakes that claim to keep that shirt. A superb performance by the youngster. And that's the thing that is scary as an English fan. You look at the bench that came in, and there is also amazing young talent that is coming through. Noah Nene as well, coming on towards the end of the fixture into the backs. Another young player who has the potential to go far. France with 21 offloads in the first half, an unbelievable number, more than they even threw against Ireland. You can argue the case about Wales giving them a chance to throw offloads, but a superb attacking match game plan. And you can tell that the French were also looking at this for bonus points and also for the points difference, which might be unlikely to happen. If they win all games, that's going to be settled. They get the extra bonus points for the Grand Slam. They've won. That's settled. But they are also probably going for what is the outright best result. This French team is generational, and this French team will win the Six Nations. I do not see England beating France. This French team is too good. We do not have a chance. England do not have a chance against this French team. At home, if they play like this, then I think England's chances are close to zero. I can't see us beating France and keeping them to no bonus points. This is the thing. If they get at least one bonus point and they win the rest of the fixtures, they've won the tournament. Even if we beat France, I think France have already won this. And that is, I think, just a statement of how strong, from the backs to the forwards, this French team really is. And you have to say, hats off to Fabien Galthié for having the guts to change your squad and for it to work. Fabien Galthié has built a squad in cooperation with all of the coaches in the top 14. And he has built a world-beating best of Europe side, almost playing barbarians rugby, which is scary to watch as a non-French fan. However, superb to watch for the neutral. On to next weekend then. And it's D-Day for England. It's D-Day for Ireland at Twickenham on Saturday. The Irish travel to London. The Irish need a victory. The English need a victory. Two teams who are low on confidence and two teams who both desperately want 5 points and want their opponents to get 0. My prediction for this is that England do win. I think England will probably get a fair few stiff training sessions this weekend, and I think we'll see that reflected in the performance. I think Ireland are still learning the squad. Ireland are still looking fairly nervy. And yes, England were nervy against Scotland, but I think that's just the atmosphere getting to you. Ireland, I think, will lose, and then I think that will be the end of their campaign. And then the question for Ireland is, well, what's to play for after that? Which I think is another discussion for another day, but there is a serious risk of a pretty huge morale deficit, which is never a good thing, particularly when we're in mid-tournament and also within a condensed Six Nations tournament with one less fallow week. I think England win this. I think England win it by 3 tries, by 21 points, with a bonus point as well. I think Ireland will probably walk away with 0, and that will spell the end of any title hopes. Wales versus Scotland at Cardiff at the Principality. Scotland do win this off the back of that result against England. And I think Wales will push. I think Wales get a bonus point out this time. I think the Wales will be able to score 4 tries. And I think that Scotland will probably be able to outscore the Welsh, maybe scoring 6, maybe win by 14 or 12. I think this is going to be a game of what will be fairly poor defence at times, but a game where there'll be the opening and where Wales will be able to get points on the board and be able to get their first point of the campaign. An important game because obviously their cup final is the final round, and they really do have to keep pressing on the accelerator to keep building towards that tie, which the way the schedule works, they will have had to wait for over a month and a half to face their cup final against Italy. I think Scotland win that by 12. On to the final fixture then, France versus Italy at Lille in northern France, where the Italians were within a penalty of defeating the mighty French in 2024. France win this. And this is not a close fixture. This is France by 28 with 0 points for the Italians. And that is when we will be potentially able to start engraving the name of France onto the shield, onto the Six Nations trophy. And when England will know the true extent of the challenge that faces them in round 5. Thank you for listening to the podcast or watching the podcast as well. You can follow at Sports News Blitz on Instagram and on Spotify as well as YouTube for the podcast, as well as the Six and Out podcast covering cricket and the T20 World Cup. My name's been Joseph Terry. Billy North Lewis will be back on the podcast next week. However, in the meantime, see you soon.